welcome panel, and also a special welcome to Ryan Tyson, who's the Vice President for Political Operations for Associated Industries of Florida, and it's the first time for him, and we're going to put him through his paces.
Thank you very much.
I think he's going to do great. Sally, heading into the final stretch run for the 2014 elections in Florida, let's talk about the governor's race. What are the critical success factors for Governor Scott's campaign for him to be successful?
I think we're in a year where authenticity really matters, and it's very clear who the authentic candidate is in the race. That's Governor Scott. Charlie Crist has been a Republican, a Democrat, an independent. He's been all over the map, and particularly with the challenges the president is facing this year, voters are looking for authenticity. He's also done what he said he was going to do. He's focused on the economy. He's created jobs, I think 650,000 over 3 years, versus Charlie Crist, who lost 800,000 jobs as governor. The record goes on, whether it's unemployment rates or the deficit. He has delivered on his promises, and so I think he's in a really good position going into the last couple of weeks.
Screven, I bet you have something to say about that, and I'm going to give you a chance to talk about Crist, and then I'm sure that Sally will have something to say about that.
I was going to say,
your reaction to
I will start off disagreeing with Sally. No, I think this race, I will agree with one thing she said, Steve. I think this race, people know both candidates. My friend Rod Smith used to say people make their decision on who they're going to vote for as to who they like, who they want to have a beer with or a cup of coffee. I think Charlie Crist wins that every time. Charlie Crist is a guy people know and they like. I think the other thing is, and voters want to see somebody that can work both sides of the aisle. Charlie Crist, they're very tired of this negativity, this partisanship, and Sally alluded to that he has been a member of different parties, but I think voters see that as somebody that can work across the aisle. When he was a Republican, he worked with the president when our economy was crashing to take money to save firefighter jobs, to save police and teacher jobs. So I think the voters see that, they'll remember that, and they'll genuinely like Charlie Crist over Rick Scott.
You kind of answered the question I was going to ask you anyway, so I'll come back to you later.
Yeah, it is overwhelming to me that you could say that with a straight face. You are my dear friend, but I'm just drowning here in the spin. It is unbelievable in a year when Barack Obama has the numbers he has, and people are tired of this cult of personality, the likability factor. They want somebody who's going to roll up their sleeves and work. That's what Rick Scott promised to do. That's what he's done. I mean, you've just seen tremendous growth in the economy in Florida. When Charlie Crist left office, the unemployment rate in Florida was 11%. It's 6.5% now. And if you want to go back even further, when my former boss was governor and he left when Charlie Crist took over, unemployment was 3%. At some point, you have to give the voters more credit than just wanting to drink a beer with the governor. I mean,
Rick Scott is not Jeb Bush, I will say that, but I'll also say that the economy has gotten better. A lot of that's had to do with the president and how and the money that came into the state. This governor came in talking about the jobs he was going to bring to the state. Show them to me. Show them to me. Several of the companies he brought in have already left this state. There are no jobs really that when he said he was going to grow by millions and millions, there's no evidence those jobs have come to this state.
650,000 private sector jobs. He committed to 700,000 over 7 years. 650
half of which I think
have
evaporated
jobs.
Since he
well,
brought
all
them
you
in.
have to do is look at the unemployment rate and see the tremendous drop under Rick Scott and his leadership. And we just have a fundamental disagreement about what the election is going to be about.
But this is a reflection of the ads we're seeing. Sally's got one spin, I've got another. Again, I will fall back to voters are going to look at both people, who they know, and they're going to go with who they like better and who they think represents Florida better. I think that's Charlie Crist.
Well, we're going to come back to the tension, if I would say, in this race, and the fact that both of you, or each of you, see this race very differently and these people very differently. And that's what's going on in this state right now. Ryan, let me ask you this. The 2014 gubernatorial race in Florida has been characterized as the most important gubernatorial race in the nation. Do you buy into that? If so, why? If not, why not?
Well, if media buys and media placement's any indication, I'd have to agree with that statement. I would tell you that with it being the state, that is a swing state in presidential election years. Obviously, this governor's race is very important to both parties. That is why you see outside spending here. That is why you see groups that aren't from Florida coming down here and doing field operations and buying media. So yeah, I would completely agree. that this is very much the most important governor's race in the country.
This has a lot to do with the presidential race.
Exactly.
As Florida goes, the presidency goes, and we've seen that. So this is as much about the presidency as it is about the gubernatorial race.
Sally, we were just talking about the negative tone to some extent, or the contrastive tone in the governor's race. It's, for a lot of people who are watching this at home on TV, it's overwhelmingly negative. I hear people talking to me, my neighbors and so forth, who know I'm involved to some extent in the process, saying, I can't stand it. I don't want to watch another commercial. I've had it. But I wanted to ask you, just why is this, to some extent, so negative and so personal? I mean, the rhetoric is very personal on both sides. And what could be some of the effects on the electorate of this kind of negative advertising, so much of it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Steve. It is, you see negative advertising because it's effective and it works. People pretend that they are not impacted by it. They don't want to admit they're impacted by it, but they are. And sometimes it's the only way to tell the story about the difference between you and your opponent on an issue. So it's effective and it works. I am really intrigued about how much TV people are actually watching, what content they're getting, because we're in a day and age now where a lot of your news comes from sources other than the television. It comes through social media, it comes through social networking, and people have the ability to fast forward over television spots. So I'm really interested to see if this is the first cycle where we start to see the wane of the impact of television. My friends who are media vendors don't want to talk about that. They don't want to hear that. But I certainly am guilty of fast forwarding over the ads.
The internet, Facebook, other things like that have really increased in terms of where people are getting their information. Not all of that's accurate, but they are going to the internet, so you're right. And I want to comment real quickly on something you said, Steve, and that is, you know, these two personalities, both the Republicans hate Charlie Crist. He left their party. He said that party left him. They want to beat this guy, and it's not just who owns the governor's mansion. It's they want to beat Charlie Crist. Likewise, the Democrats, you know, Rick Scott stole an election they thought they were going to have with Alex Sink last time. They don't like Rick Scott, so you have personal vendettas being leveled here that go over and above what we normally see.
Okay. Ryan, this is not simply a campaign for the D's and the R's votes. There's another big group of people that may be more important in the final analysis than the D's and the R's, and there are terms for them, but basically they're unaffiliated or independent voters. Talk about who they are.
You know, the data doesn't lie that the only party, if you would, that's growing in Florida these days is the none of the above party, if you would. These are voters who, whether they left a registration form blank and decided to choose neither, or they have actually selected no party affiliation, they're the only portion of the electorate in terms of the partisan affiliation. That is growing. These voters cannot be whitewashed, or they can't be painted with the same brush, if you would. They have opinions that are very different, but they're educated. They know what the issues are about. They know who the candidates are. That's very different from 20 years ago. I believe that the candidate that's able to win, or at least for the governor's advantage, if he can at least split independents or the third party, if you would, that puts him in best position to win. But make no mistake about it, the most important portion of the electorate, in my opinion, will be those independents, those third-party voters, because they will vote.
That was what I was going to ask you. You think that they're not just going to sit at home, that they're watching what's happening and they're listening and they're going to be motivated to vote?
Yes, sir. They'll have a little bit more of a drop-off than they do in presidential years, but they will vote in this election. They're going to be anywhere between 16 to 17, 18% of the turnout. That's a big number. I believe back whenever Governor Bush was on the ballot in 2002, it was far less than that.
See, you know, Ryan, nobody in this state's done more research on this than Ryan Tyson, and he's been gracious enough to share a little bit this with me, and I think Sally would agree with me. This rise of these no major party people is a problem, a major problem for both parties. As Ryan points out, they're voting and they're making a decision when they register to not associate themselves with the Republicans or the Democrats. But in Florida, over the next 6, 7, 8 years, they're going to have dramatic impacts. First of all, we'll see it in this governor's race, but as we move through legislative races and others, this is the group that both parties have to spend money talking to and try to get them to their side of the aisle on that particular election, because they're gonna a la carte. They're gonna pick from both parties.
You're still going to see Republicans, though, turn out, when you agree, Ron, at a higher percentage in a non-presidential year than you are no major party, and certainly Democrat voters, which is a problem for Crist and the down ballot races on the Democrat
side. The
side.
key to that is what that percentage is. I mean, it's hard to buck history. Republicans do turn out more in off-year elections, but the question is how much more. If it's 1 or 2%, it negates. That's not going to turn this election.
Sally, in a race this tight, and I think everyone would agree it's tight, there will be debates, and there are, I can remember times in Florida history where it seems like a race can turn on a debate, where somebody mishandles something or whatever. How important will the debates be, or could they be, in this election for governor?
I mean, debates can always matter, but I think the debates are a real opportunity for Governor Scott to again state the obvious, which is he has effectively led the state. He has followed through on his commitments, and Charlie Crist has not, time and time again. Whether Charlie Crist was a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, his motivation has been to hold elective office, not to solve problems. And I look forward to the opportunity that Governor Scott is going to be able to have to spell out his story over the course of a debate.
I think the debates will matter, but I think it's fascinating because I think these debates could be like Kennedy-Nixon. Governor Scott is not comfortable in front of a camera. When he gives his speeches, State of the State, he is not a comfortable person in that environment. Charlie Crist is made for that environment. I think Charlie Crist will be akin to the Kennedy in that analogy. I think number two is you see these debates become something, Steve, if something goes wrong. Remember in 2010, the debate gate. It wasn't what was said inside the debate. It was whether Alex Sink cheated or not. It was a ridiculous argument, but the fact is it took 3 or 4 days for Alex Sink to answer that question. Meanwhile, she was off her message. So it's usually what can go wrong or be said, some flub that then the media runs with and gets that particular candidate off message.